Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alan Gurney, Marketing Executive at Filtered, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, 10 Insights for Engaging with Learn. The webinar will be led by Towards Maturity's Head of Advisory Services, Marnie Threapleton, and Filtered's very own Head of Marketing, Paolo Lenotti. Before we pass the controls over to Marnie and Paolo, just a few bits of housekeeping. Firstly, if you're new to Filtered, we're an online training provider specialising in the use of adaptive technologies to personalise content, accelerating learning and reducing training time. We've recently won silver in the Innovation in Learning Award and bronze in the Learning Technologies Award at the 2016 Learning Awards, and we're finalists in the 2015 EdTech 20. About the webinar, if you'd like to download a copy of the report behind the webinar, The Consumer Learner at Work, you can do so at learn.filter.com/whitepapers or via Towards Maturity website, www.towardsmaturity.org/index/research. Since our last webinar, we've launched a few new courses on Filtered, our Business Systems Design online course suite with QA training and our Digital Collaboration in Office 365 course. The Business System Design courses are aimed at business analysts looking to gain a deeper understanding of strategy, analysis, process and change. They're the perfect foundation for those looking to improve the general skill set, but also ideal for individuals preparing for the BSc diploma in International Diploma in Business Analysis. Digital Collaboration in Office 365 course looks at the common features of Office 365 and how they can be used to support collaboration and communication in the workplace. It will teach your staff to monitor and collaborate on projects and tasks, share knowledge and content, and use social and communication tools effectively. Check out filter.com to find out more and to see our full range of courses. If you have any questions for Marnie and Paolo during the webinar, please submit them into the question pane during the webinar. We'll be taking a short break to the halfway point to answer them, and again at the end of the session. You can also send us questions or share thoughts on Twitter using #FilteredWebinar. If we don't get around to fielding your question, please do email us at hello@filtered.com after the webinar. Finally, I'd like to remind you that you can again download the white paper via our website and Towards Maturity one. That's all over from me now, so it gives me great pleasure to hand you over to Marnie to start the webinar off. Marnie, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Alan, and thank you to everybody for taking the time out this afternoon to attend this webinar. I really hope that you take away some ideas and actions for you to help you to do things a little bit differently and to respond to your learner needs as a result of this research. So just to add a little bit of context, I read very recently 2 reports by Accenture and PricewaterhouseCoopers, which really helped to set the scene, as I say, or to add context, if you like, for the reason that we need to understand our learners. So the core idea behind the liquid workforce by Accenture is all about using technology as an enabler, which transforms people, projects, and entire organisations into highly adaptable, agile enterprises. So the key is to proactively help people adapt to rapidly changing demands, innovating workforce strategies to be more fluid and flexible. The digital revolution, whether we like it or not, and I'm sure that you all resonate with that, is here, and it's fundamentally changing every aspect of the business, from strategies to business models to processes, and also to the future workforce. So our role is to help solve business problems through learning interventions, not necessarily just to provide courses, but actually to solve those business problems. The PwC 14th Annual CEO Report found that 93% of CEOs' strategic objectives fell into 4 key areas: competitiveness, agility, attracting and retaining talent, and also productivity. According to Accenture, what that means is that we have to have the talent practices to attract, develop, and also to inspire people on their own terms. So looking at transparency, hyper-personalization, listening to our people, and really being the cornerstone of the employee experience. GE's university, the Global Brain, they've actually branded it as a kind of futuristic, buzzing hive of knowledge, which all sounds very fascinating, actually, because GE believes that companies must collaborate to empower anytime, anywhere working using collaborative tools and also cloud workflows. So now we've got a kind of sense of the wider context. What does that actually mean for us? What do we need to do, and what can we learn from learners themselves? So for the past 13 years, Towards Maturity has been benchmarking organisations on the effective implementation of learning innovation, the use of technology as an enabler, and how people prefer to learn at work. Given the changes in the workforce and workplace and access to resources, this line between learning inside and outside the workplace is diminishing, and I'm sure that a lot of the learners really resonate with that. Learners are demanding that we do things differently. Towards Maturity and Filtered have collaborated to bring this consumer learner perspective into this new report so that L&D can learn from learners both inside and outside the organisations to serve them better. And this report is going to be available after the webinar. From the responses of over 3,500 learners, over 2,000 of them were paying for or part paying for the learning out of their own pocket, which is actually pretty amazing. And these are the consumer learners. And many will be in your organisations as learning and development professionals. So this independent evidence is really critical to help you understand what your learners want. But why is this a growing market? Why do we need to think of our learners as customers? What's happening in the workplace with our workforce? And I'm sure, again, that you've been reading some of this out and about. But just to qualify that a little bit further, the 2014 Global Futures Report tells us gives us a number of facts here. Gen Y will make up 75% of the workforce by 2025. 83% of millennials say freelancing will be their career model going forward. 79% of HR executives are expecting employees to have a simultaneous or portfolio careers by 2018. That's not very far down the road, guys. 33% of people are working past the age of 65, and 25% of the workforce will be age 70 by 2028. And when we talk about millennial is an attitude, it's not just an age. So don't get too hung up on that as being just an age. So understanding how individuals learn at work is essential if we're going to support this changing workforce effectively. So we've compared the data to that of the Towards Maturity 2015 Learning Industry Benchmark Report. And this is as a community of over 4,500 L&D professionals and 23,000 learners. And what it does is it serves to illustrate some of the assumptions that we can make as L&D professionals that can be challenged by the input of the learners in this report. So I'm going to hand over to Paolo now just to take you through some of those findings of the consumer learner.
Hi everyone, and thank you again, Alan and Marnie. Apologies, as I think some of you might have experienced some issues with the first part of the presentation. I hope you can all see the content of the slides right now. I'm very excited to present this again today. Actually, Marnie and I presented Learning Technologies, a big trade show here in London in early February. And I'm also very excited because I'm usually behind the scenes when it comes to promoting our webinars or maybe posting content on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I'm really the one hosting it. So please do share on social media today. Our account is @FilterCourses, and do use the hashtag #FilterWebinar. I'm head of marketing here at Filter, but I'm also the head of our foundation. So before we crack on with the insights, I would like to just mention the foundation. If you work in the not-for-profit sector, or if you work for a charity, please do get in touch with the foundation at filter.com, because it will be very interesting to talk about how learners work in your sector and sort of ad hoc projects that we can do together. So positive outlook is the first insight. It is if you consider the learner point of view. We know that 80% of our workers consider online learning useful, essential to further their career. In some cases, actually 70% of today's workers already saw a positive impact on job performance through online learning. However, and this is a bit of a paradox, and if you download the report after the webinar, you will see this as a sort of trend across the whole research. There is a big contrast between what the learners want, what we want as individuals in the workplace, and what we are actually offered from our managers, from our training managers when it comes to training. So, for example, only 21% of L&D leaders support career aspirations, we found out through this research. Actually, 4 out of 5 L&D leaders struggle to engage their staff internally, which suddenly makes the overall outlook way less positive. So preparing this presentation, I thought, okay, where is the love then, which is our insight number 2 for today. 88% of users know what learning they need. Over 80% know how to find it. 93%, which is really, really high, are responsible for their own learning and development. However, yet 3 in 5 L&D leaders don't believe the staff can manage their own learning. And again, this is a dangerous paradox, and I think there are 2 lessons here. One, as workers, I think in the workplace, we need to bring up new training opportunities, discuss our experience with L&D appraisals, make L&D really work with the KPIs of our jobs. And don't necessarily feel like we have to pay for our own learning. I would like to stress that this research was conducted among over 2,000 people who either paid for the training or contributed to the cost of the training. The companies can also pay for your training. Don't be shy. Don't be shy when it comes to raising that as part of your appraisal. And training managers at the same time, I think you guys need to start giving more credit to your employees. They know more what you think. This is what the outcome of this research is. They're very ambitious. They're tech savvy, and they know what they want when it comes to training. So there's more credit. Give them more credit. The third insight of the research is a sort of catch me if you can situation. Technology features heavily across the study. Mobile, this is an example with the classic Apple smartphone and the apps that we use on a daily basis. Accessing learning from mobile is essential these days. 2 in 3 find accessing learning from mobile devices essential, very useful. And how can we blame them when a lot of things we do, from online shopping, speaking with family and friends, colleagues, even dating online, is through those devices. However, 40% of L&D leaders agree that staff can learn in places that are convenient to them. And another interesting point I'd like to mention off the back of the research was that nearly 50% of today's workers learn evenings and weekends, and I'm one of those, actually, to be honest with you, because time is a barrier. But again, how can it not be if, in most cases, for 40% of cases, the training that we are offered in the workplace is not convenient, really, it's not flexible enough. Point number 4: there is more life than courses. There is more to life than courses. I recently attended an event here in London. Some of you might know it. Some of you, to most of you out there, is probably new. It's a series of networking events organized by the Learning Directors Network, by the Learning and Performance Institute. So it's around 50 people, very relevant senior L&D training managers who gather once every quarter here in London and discuss the latest trends in the EdTech training industry. One of the key points, and I promise, because this was a couple of months back, and it was still a data coming from a research from towards maturity, actually, was that pretty much 50%, actually over 50% of businesses still see the course as the only option. So at the end of the day, we L&D managers might consider a lot of new tech options, but at the end of the day, they kind of go back to the comfort zone. And when it comes to assigning the training budget, they go back to the classic, in over 50% of cases at least, they go back to the classic 1 or 2 days out of the office, classroom-based training, one-size-fits-all kind of approach, which clearly can't work anymore. So my point, my contribution to that chat, and not just mine, but that's the data from the research, which is obviously way more meaningful, is that courses are resources. So we shouldn't really put that against the other, but courses are resources, and so are webinars. So this is, for example, today's session. So our blog posts, articles that we read on a relevant website, going to a trade show, having a good networking event. I think it's all about how we use this sort of content and how we go back to our manager and report on how much we learn through these new tools. 80%, for example, say that Google or other search web resources are essential or very useful to learn. Okay, this is great, but I think there are two very interesting outcomes here. One, for the learner, I think we need to find ways to monitor and report on the resources that we use, for example, Google in this case, show our boss how much we learn through Google, for example, and find our own ways to build on that success, which is not the classic training or face-to-face sort of delivery. And then for L&D leaders, again, leave your comfort zone, think beyond the standard classroom-based, one-size-fits-all type of course, use new technology, companies like Filter, for example, or other companies out there, and be a bit more brave and bold, really, with your training budget. I'm nearly halfway through my 10 points, so I just wanted to ask Alan if we have any questions so far, or not.
Hi, Paolo. No, we have no questions at the moment, so crack on, please.
Sure. Insight number 5 is again about technology. I do invite you to download the report on the website, both the Filter website and the Towards Maturity one. It's free to download anyway. And it's a really good 40-50 pages, solid document. And you will see technology features heavily. For example, 52% of today's modern worker use YouTube for their own learning, and nearly 90% download apps. Most of them actually download education apps, so very relevant to training and learning and development. Yet 50% of L&D leaders we know that feel held back by staff reluctance to engage with new technology. But how can that be when in the workflows we have these very tech-savvy, ambitious, innovative learners, and then we feel like from a senior sort of point of view that they're not ready to actually engage with new technology. Certainly one of the two can be right, and it would be a very interesting one to investigate in your workplace. Then the personalized approach. I mean, personalizing, obviously, we can call it customizing, we can call it a bespoke approach, depending on the industry. It's pretty much the same. It's pretty much the same thing. It's a big trend in our society. Think of some tools that we use every day: Google, Amazon, Netflix. All the sort of online content is served by algorithms. Sometimes we don't even realize that's how personalized actually our experience is. Personalized is also offline. This is a picture of just some Nutella that I received from my girlfriend last Christmas, and I just thought it was a few pounds, but just a simple, very simple, cheap present. But the thought is very important, and it's the same when you experience something, when you're learning something. You really want something that fits around you and your existing knowledge, where you want to go next. 1 in 2 want a personalized learning experience. 1 in 4 find that essential. But how can it be then that only 26% of businesses have a sort of tech element to the formal learning? Clearly, these days, personalized learning comes with a sort of technology aspect to it, and we cannot have just 1 in 4 companies offering that. We can do better than that. Managers are important. Now, I promise that I didn't come out with these slides yesterday because of the Oscar, and DiCaprio finally won an Oscar. You can check on Twitter. Marnie and I presented this a month ago, and that was really one of the slides. But jokes aside, 1 in 3 of today's workers, and again, we surveyed nearly 4,000 people, of which over 2,000 people paid for their own learning, say that training support from the managers is critical. So the kind of picture we get here is that as learners these days we've become really independent and flexible and ambitious. However, and you will see with actually insight number 10, and with this one about managers, we still look up to our boss at the end of the day, to our managers for direction, which is understandable. Yet only 1 in 5 L&D leaders equip managers with the tools to support the teams. So again, there is this big clash, this paradox between the expectation of an ambitious learner and what they actually are offered in the workplace around them. And I picked this slide not just for that kind of joke about DiCaprio, the Oscar, but because I think in the film The Wolf of Wall Street, there are actually some amazing bits about training from from the staff, from their manager. Clearly, the content of the training is strongly debatable. That's not my point. But my point is that if you've watched the film, and I'm sure most of you did watch it, you remember those clips where he's on the phone explaining the cold calling, the sales strategy very, very well, or the boilerplate, the pitch of the company that he came up with himself, and then everyone is so passionate and learning from the boss. So I think a little bit of that, obviously with good quality training, and not the content of that of the film, but it's something we need to kind of, as managers, raise our games for sure. Insight number 8, there's a couple more of insights. So the number 8 is collaboration. It's important to stress that personalization is a big trend these days, and it's what we do a filter, and really what comes one of the key points of this research. However, there's a difference between personalization and isolation. If you see this slide, in fact, there's a group of people actually talking to each other. Collaboration is key for a truly sociable experience. 84% of today's workers are willing to share knowledge through technology. However, only 20% do it regularly. So why is this gap? Why is this such a big difference? Well, perhaps because only 11% of L&D leaders encourage staff to solve problems socially together, and 12% by using curation tools. It seems to me here there's a big gap between the willingness to share, the desire to share, especially through technology, and then the reality side of things. And bear in mind that these questions, and again, you can see all that because it's all in the report if you want to download the full document. It's not just a wishy-washy kind of knowledge through technology. It's actually a clear list of channels, for example, webinars, blog posts, forums, writing articles, newsletters. So it's very, very tangible. There is a great desire there. So to all the L&D managers listening, let's kind of find ways to engage our staff, our workers, and collaborate more and get them to share the knowledge more, because it seems like pretty much all of them, 84%, are very willing to do that. High and dry is one of our last points for today. So obviously there are lots of reasons to learn. One of them is still to work towards a sort of qualification or certificate, the old sort of piece of paper, if you want. That's still quite important. 50% of today's workers want learning to contribute to a sort of qualification or certificate. And how can we blame them if they spend so much time and effort? Maybe they learn weekends or evenings, as we saw earlier, and sometimes they have to do it by themselves, even pay for the training themselves, because there might be a sort of lack of support from the managers. However, only 22% of L&D leaders recognize and reward learners in the workplace. That's not enough. That's only 2 out of them, and it's certainly not enough. It's the opposite of what we just said, basically, about how passionate the training manager needs to be still, and the drive that you get from your boss. So that's another point that businesses we need to improve as from when we offer training to our workers, and make that sort of qualification, the final retribution, the certificate very clear, and maybe make it part of a KPI, a sort of appraisal, create some structure around that. The final input, which is why we're all here, I guess, today, L&D is also as important as the training managers, as our line managers. So L&D from a sort of higher, broader level as industry. There's a lot of input in today's session, and more in the research, of course, that you can take. Yes, from the learner worker point of view, way more, I think, from the business point of view, from the L&D expert point of view. There are, though, some companies out there, thank God, I would say, that are doing it right. Some of these companies report way better benefits and results compared to the average business. Obviously, my suggestion working for Filter could be if you don't do already, do start considering online learning as an option, in particular a personalized type of training. We have a big library, something like 20 courses that can definitely help your worker become more modern and professional in their skills. However, I think that wouldn't be enough. We can't just close this session saying check out our Filter courses. So we'll pass back to Marnie, who's going to conclude the session with more insights from towards maturity.
No pressure. Thanks very much indeed, Paolo. So now that we understand the context and the report findings, I guess the big question is, what do we need to do differently to deliver business outcomes and results? So the Towards Maturity 2015 Industry Benchmark Report looks at those behaviours and practices and the corresponding business, staff and efficiency indicators that assesses the effectiveness and the impact of those practices excuse me, and those behaviours. And specifically, we look at the top deck, the top 10% of learning and development organisations, to see what they're doing differently and the results that they're delivering. And without fail, those top deck organisations, learning organisations, give their learners a customer-activated voice, and they're able to quantify those bottom line impacts back into the business. If you want to know how to compare yourself against a top learning organisation, by the way, you can participate in the benchmark for free, and I'll give you the details at the end. So I just want to share with you some of the evidence that you can take away to support maybe some of your first steps at implementing the action to support your learners better. In some of here, if we ask the question, what can L&D learn and do more of from this report? These percentages, I'm not going to read everyone out, I'm sure you've got that ability yourselves. The percentages are those top deck organisations who are applying the action. So all these statements are action statements. The percentages of the top deck who are applying those. The percentages in the brackets are there for you to see what the average benchmark participants are actually doing. And you'll see there that there's a distinctive difference. And just running through, there's probably about 10 stats here that you can just look and read through for yourselves. And if you want to know more about what those mean, then you can download the Towards Maturity 2015 Benchmark Report, Embracing Change, and get some insights into that, or contact us afterwards. Practical examples about what people are actually doing here. So, for example, top deck organisations, 67% of top deck organisations are encouraging individuals to organise their own learning strategies. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you think of the analogy of teaching somebody to fish rather than providing that, then I think that's a really good analogy to use. So top deck organisations are organising learning groups, how to learn, where to go, where is it, and that's really beneficial when you consider that over 25% of our learners don't know where to find the learning that they need. In fact, it's one of the most significant barriers. Also, top deck organisations, they encourage learners and they think beyond the course. So it's not just about one course starting from start to finish, I think as Paolo brought up there, but 73% of them are providing them with micro content of less than 10 minutes. They're helping to facilitate collaboration. We find that in the learner research that 88% of our learners are willing to collaborate with each other, and also it's one of the most useful areas of learning and places that they go to pick up what they need to be able to do their job better and faster. So 43% are encouraging learners to solve problems together using social media, for example, whereas it's only 11% of those within the average benchmark there. So you can see there's a few ideas there. But most importantly, we said at the beginning of this, what is it that these top deck organisations, if they are doing all these things, if they're taking all these actions and focusing on giving the learners a customer activated voice, what are they actually realising? And so you can see here that those top deck organisations who are taking action and doing things differently to engage their learners are delivering many more time impacts than those in the bottom quartile. They are 8 times more likely to be able to deliver a shift in learning culture, to deliver business outcomes and impacts. And when you look at your behaviours and practices, perhaps if you do take the opportunity to review and compare yourselves, your learning and development behaviours and practices in the benchmark, you may well find to begin with that it's easier to be able to look at perhaps some of the more traditional efficiency questions and quantify those. So the reduction in the amount of time, or perhaps the increase in learning that we can use technology for deployment. And then as you go further through looking at the processes and looking at productivity questions and then responsiveness and then getting into culture, you may find it a little bit more challenging. But these practices and behaviours that you can learn from through going through the benchmark process, these are what the top deck are actually doing. And we have firm examples of it. The evidence is there that it works and it delivers a bigger bottom line impact. So I encourage you to look at that and also to embrace the customer activated voice there. So I guess really the big question is, you sat through this webinar for the past half an hour. Maybe there's going to be a few more minutes for questions and for wrapping up. So of the 45 minutes that you're going to spend this afternoon, how wisely has that been spent, and what will you do differently as a result of today? What have you picked up? What have you learned? What is the one thing, maybe 2 or even 3 things that you can take away from today? So to begin that process, I would strongly recommend that perhaps you download the full report of the consumer learner and start to think about perhaps some of those questions, some of those findings in the consumer learner at work. How would your learners respond to that? Are they reflective of what the findings are? Given that over 3,500 people were surveyed for this study, and over 2,000 were putting their own hands in their pockets to pay for their own learning, and I think there's some pretty strong trends coming through there that we can learn from, and lessons that we can learn. So download the full report. That's the first thing that you can do, and consider yourselves with your learners and what they may be saying, but also benchmark yourselves against those who are already doing it well. And if you want to know more, there's a couple of websites there. You can email Towards Maturity directly on benchmark@towardsmaturity.org. Alternatively, go straight into the benchmark, and also hop on to learn.filter.com/approach to know more about the resources that are available to help you meet the needs of your learners there. So I'm just going to hand back over to Paolo and Alan there. I'd just like to say thank you very much, and I hope that maybe do one thing differently.
Thanks, Marnie. I'm just going to crack on with a few of the questions we've received during the webinar. There's a few here. Apologies, we won't be able to get through all of them. If we don't manage to field your question, please do get in touch with us at hello@filter.com after the webinar, and we'll obviously get back to you with the answers. The first question is from David, and he's asked, how do users want their learning experience to be personalised?
Sorry, can you say that again? Sorry, what was the question?
How do users want their learning experience to be personalised?
I would say they want to learn what's useful to them, and they don't want to waste time learning things that they already know or they might have gone through already many times. For example, if you think about compliance courses, they are mandatory, so it's something that in some industries, finance, insurance, and banking, it's sort of training is some content that you need to learn, and then you need to demonstrate that you learn every year by law. So I think, yeah, it's about learning what you actually really want to learn and stop wasting your time on things that don't actually interest you, or you're just doing to tick a box and make your boss happy, and all the sort of, the political part of our jobs, which is real and it's okay, but just learn what they want and what they need to develop their careers, to become better at what they do, and no matter what they do. So I would say they expect that in a way. They kind of, I would say today we expect that from a lot of other tools. Some of the other platforms that I mentioned earlier that we use to either search something online, or to buy something, or to stream content online. So I kind of think it's mandatory. And also I would say that the new generation would almost expect that and take that for granted. Kind of, and the new generation who are gonna come to our offices in the next few years, they will be astonished by the lack of it, if there's still a lack of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that as well. Next question comes from Anand, and it's kind of tagging on the back of the last question, actually, Paolo, with the response that you've given. It says, why are L&D teams not accepting the technology? Is it because most of them are millennials? So I think that kind of ties in quite nicely.
Well, I would say L&D and then Marnie, it would be interesting to see your point of view. I believe that, especially in large businesses, and that's not criticism, please don't get me wrong, but obviously senior kind of L&D training managers, HR managers, let's say the senior management team anyway, across the board, are maybe of a certain age, or come from a sort of certain kind of classroom-based, old school, I would say, type of education, which is also my kind of background, by the way, I would say. Not entirely, though. The new guys coming in, millennials, we can call them whoever we want to call them. Every 10, 20 years we come up with a new name for the generation, that's okay. They are just way more knowledgeable, unfortunately. Sometimes they're their own managers about some of these tools. So I would say that I can understand why in some cases the person in charge of training can be even a bit defensive and play safe and just go along with what they did the previous year, because it's quite easy and you have it, in the bag, and you know what you're doing. I don't think long term is gonna pay off. I think it's an understandable but wrong, I think, way of doing things. I think we need to educate L&D managers who might not be that familiar with apps, with mobiles, with new technology, and that's okay. I don't think it's wrong. Nothing is not wrong admitting that you don't know something. It's actually, if that's what, if that's the job, and then they should be the first eager to learn something new. And so I think that could be why there's a sort of reluctance to engage with new technology. From the L&D point of view.
And do you have anything to add to that, Marnie?
Yeah, I do actually. I actually have a little bit of sympathy with L&D professionals today, because I think that the landscape is incredibly overwhelming, and research shows that actually top deck organisations are actively equipping their L&D professionals as agents of change. I think that's actually unfortunate that perhaps only 25% of L&D leaders actually know how their L&D teams are equipped to be the agents of change. So I would say that maybe there's not a reluctance, it's not that there's a reluctance to embrace the technology. I would suggest that there is a lot of noise going on out there. To give you a little bit of background in the research, what we found is over the past 4 years, of going through the benchmark process, what we found is that the numbers of technologies that have been used over the past 4 years has increased by over 200% in over 50% of the benchmark respondents. Now that's a phenomenal curve to ask anybody to be au fait with when they're trying to provide solutions back into the business. So I think the challenge is perhaps on the focus. It's not necessary to know every single technology that there is out there, but I think that top deck organisations demonstrate quite clearly that there are perhaps 4 things that they do that make sure that technology is the enabler within an organisation rather than the shiny penny. And I think it's really important for learning and development professionals to be reassured that to come from that perspective is actually more of a value to the organisation rather than having to know all the technology themselves. So, for example, aligning to the business, knowing what it is that you're there to do, creating those learning interventions to be able to meet the needs of the organisation, understanding your learner and how that learner prefers to work. You know, why go down a certain technology route if that's just not going to be received very well by your learning audience? Don't bother with it. Move on. Find out what it is that you do need to focus on and concentrate on delivering that in the way in which learners want to learn. Look at the learning transformation tools and frameworks that there are out there, but use it as a guide, use it as a framework, and look actually at your own skills, and let's look at equipping L&D for the future. And I think that those are the things, rather than painting the picture that, you know, we're not embracing technology. I think that's a little bit unfair actually on the L&D professionals, if I might put my hand up and stand up there and say that.
It's fair enough, it's fair enough.
That's great. And also to sort of piggyback off that question, which I think is quite a nice follow-up here, from Kevin. What sort of tools could an L&D leader supply to their managers? Any examples?
Marnie, any examples of tools?
You know, when we go out and we look at we look at the learner voice, managers are the biggest influence with our learners, and I think that the challenge here is to kind of create the golden thread and really to facilitate that collaboration between L&D, HR, the organisational design, understanding the business objectives, and actually working alongside L&D. Working alongside business to really understand what it is that those managers are looking to achieve with their own business objectives. So if we're looking at managers themselves, it's really to support them more fully, to make sure that the learning is aligned with their business objectives, but also again coming back to really understanding the learners, supporting them in the objectives before learners go off to do learning, understanding what's available, enabling the follow-up afterwards, making sure that they can actually find the learning that they need to find. You know, if we look at some of the barriers to learning, for example, discounting the lack of time for self-study, that's always going to come through. And, you know, I would actually challenge that there is a need here to make a paradigm shift in the language that we use when we talk about learning. If we still think of learning as being very traditional, then our learners will think of learning as being very traditional. In other words, I'm not getting any learning, I don't have time to go off for 3 days to do a course. You know, but if we point out, if we teach to fish, if we say that when we go through and we click on a link and we're reading something through Twitter, that's a learning experience, I would challenge that if you actually got people to think about learning in that way, then the time factor is actually minimised and that doesn't become such a barrier. But ensuring that the learning content is inspiring, you know, ensuring that the technology issues are overcome, and ensuring that the online the learning is relevant to what the learners need, and that they can actually find what they need, and making sure that they clearly understand the learning objectives. So I think these are some of the tools that we can give managers to support learning. And I think L&D can do a really good job in that, in facilitating that.
And of course, filter.com, which is a great tool and as a software, as a platform for some some really good quality content. No, jokes aside about Filter, I think it's important to really track and monitor everything we do. So I think it's something I mentioned maybe once or twice during the insight. So not just the L&D, obviously, manager, but as learner ourselves, let's learn to report on the success or failure of something that we do. It's very important, I think, to then discuss that with our manager. If it's offline, if it's online, if it's on a system that we might come up ourselves or apps that exist already, doesn't make a difference to me as long as if you can track and really monitor what's happening.
Okay. Guys, that's about all we've got time for on the question front. Thanks to everyone else who wrote in. Again, as I said, do get in touch with us at hello@filter.com and we'll be more than happy to get back to you with the answers to your questions after the webinar. That's basically it from us. I really want to take the time to thank both Marnie and Paolo for delivering such a fascinating webinar, and hopefully these insights have given you guys some ideas of how to change the learning cultures where you work and to better help support your staff in self-directed learning. Thanks to all you for obviously attending today, and once again apologies for the technical difficulties at the start of the webinar. Hopefully that will resolve itself for you guys. Before we leave, just a couple of other bits. If you'd like to rewatch the webinar, we'll be issuing a recording via learn.filter.com/webinars within the next sort of 48 hours, so do check the website sort of tomorrow and the following day. You can also register for upcoming webinars there and take a look at all of our previous webinars that we have stored there. And also, just so that you all know, you'll be receiving a copy of the slide deck in a follow-up email in about an hour's time following the end of this webinar. So that's everything from me. Once again, thanks for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you for our next webinar on the 21st of March, Personalise Your Learning Experience at 4:30 p.m. Have a great evening, guys. Take care. Bye.